there are three things that I do every day. Something to nourish my mind, something to nourish my body, and something to nourish my soul. And it doesn't really matter the duration of those things, and it doesn't really matter the intensity. To me, consistency is what I optimize for, so doing it every day.
All right, Teddy, welcome to the podcast, man. I'm psyched to have you.
Thanks, Greg, man. Honored to be here.
Awesome. And for our listeners, maybe who don't know you as well, just a little quick background. You are, of course, an executive coach today. You're serving leaders and organizations from across a variety of industries. You're an accomplished writer and creator. You've done a really nice job building a large following on Twitter and on LinkedIn. And you're a former tech and startup executive and an alumni of the media world. So you're not that old a guy, Teddy, but you've done a lot. So pretty impressive stuff. I want to learn how you've been doing all of this kind of stuff and some of the key lessons that you've learned and that maybe you're imparting on some of your coaching clients today. But I was thinking maybe a place where we could start is maybe a little bit less obvious. And that's a place that I think has been one that's been formative in your life so far. And that's the baseball diamond. So tell me a little bit about your baseball career to start and maybe like how that's shaped the Teddy that we know and love today.
Yeah, sure. There won't be a ton of highlights, but I'll share the lessons from the career. I grew up obsessed with baseball. I'm 33 years old, so I grew up on the West Coast. On the West Coast, we had TBS, and everyone has TBS. And at 4 p.m., they would show Atlanta Braves games. Mm-hmm. And I remember I was, 4 or 5 years old when a rookie third baseman came up named Chipper Jones.
Oh, yeah.
And my dad wasn't home from work yet, and I would be turning on the TV and watching Chipper Jones. And my dad would come home, and I would tell him, "Hey, you got to watch this Chipper Jones. And I was 5 years old, maybe. And from that day, I just became obsessed with baseball. Played it from 5 to 21 years old. It was the arena where I was forged in so many ways. And I played a lot of other sports growing up, basketball, golf, football. But when I got to high school is when I really started to get serious and specialize, if you will, in baseball. Okay. And it's just been such a part of my life that taught me almost, all of my formative lessons. And even today, I've spent like the last 10 years really trying to find what that athletic, physical component of my life in this stage of life now is as a husband and a dad and an adult. And that's led me to endurance sports. But baseball has been a big part of my growth and of my journey. And almost everything that the way that I learn is by doing things. And so almost everything that I know or have experienced, I can tie back to some kind of physical experience that then was brought into business or some other context, but the same lesson applies.
So you played at Chapel Hill, right?
Yeah, I played at a junior college first in Southern California, and then played at UNC.
Awesome. And what was your position in baseball?
I was a pitcher in college. When you're growing up and in high school, you play a lot of stuff. So pitched, played first base, third base, hit. But once I got to college, it was strictly pitching.
Wow. So that's the most sort of mental or psychological position probably of all, right? I mean, it's so I'm interested in this for a variety of reasons, but one is that, I mentioned to you, before we started recording that my family is really into baseball. So my 10-year-old, soon to be 11-year-old son he plays on two different teams right now. So he's on a rec team, which I coached, and he's on what they call a challenge team, which is like the kind of traveling around where we are, the Charlotte area, and playing all different types of teams there. But gosh, I mean, there's so many, even at this age, 10, 11 years old, it is like, there are so many like life lessons on an almost daily basis with these kids. One of the things that I'm always stressing to these guys is basically, and I'm like a broken record about this, but basically this idea that like, we know bad things are going to happen. Like we know that 100% bad things are going to happen, but what we don't yet know is like how we're going to react. Right. And so that's the type of thing that I'm trying to hammer into these guys. But like, I'm curious for you. I mean, as you progressed, to higher and higher levels, I mean, interesting for me to hear that you played a bunch of different sports. That's kind of encouraging because I kind of like that approach as well, even with my own kids. But I'm curious too. I mean, there must have been tons of setbacks and times of like disappointment and stuff like that. Like for you, as you were going through your baseball journey, like what was that? Was there one or two that like stand out that you like totally got knocked down and ended up being like a real lesson for you?
Yeah, there's been tons. But I mean, there's one period of time that really stands out. So just for context, baseball was easy for me from literally 5 years old. Like I was playing against 7-year-olds up until about my sophomore year of high school. Like, and I don't say this to brag, I'm just saying it to give context for what's to come next. I was, if not the best player on my team in my area, I was one of the best. It was easy. And then from 15 years old through the end of my college career, it was incredibly difficult. And it was those 6 years were marked by struggle and disappointment. And it took me a long time to figure out why and what the lessons were. But a couple things that come to mind. I spent, when you have aspirations to play at the next level, whether that's college or professionally, growing up, at least in America, we have a system of travel ball, and you have professional scouts and college recruiters, and you spend so much time trying to play to impress somebody. And I fell into that trap because you have an aspiration. And once I hit some adversity in high school, and wasn't performing well, it was very tough. And I got so mentally wrapped around the idea of I need to perform to somebody's standard in order to earn that scholarship or earn the opportunity potentially to get drafted professionally. And I just completely forgot of like why I played, why I loved it, what the purpose even was. And I remember, so I didn't have a great high school career after my, freshman and sophomore year. And so coming out of high school, I didn't have any Division I scholarship offers. I had some opportunities at the D2 level. But I chose to go to a junior college. And I remember a moment distinctly. The season started at the junior college level in late January. And this was around like right after the new year. And when you're a pitcher, you run what are called poles. You run on the warning track from foul pole to foul pole and back, part of conditioning. And I remember the January before my sophomore year, I had a moment on the warning track by myself one afternoon. And I said, you know what? If this is the last year I ever play, that's totally fine. But I'm going to play this year to see how good I can be. And it's just going to be for me. It's not going to be to impress anybody else. I just want to know.
That was in junior college when you had that?
Yeah, right before my sophomore season. And I said, I just want to know what I have, and I want to be content that I gave it my best and that this is my last year and I enjoyed it. And I'm no longer going to play my last year for somebody else. There's a lot that went into that season, but it's not a coincidence to me that I was first team all conference, led the league. I was a closer, led the league in a bunch of categories and had the best season that I've ever had. And that led to an opportunity to go play in the ACC at North Carolina. And then I got to North Carolina and just mightily struggled. It was so frustrating. I developed what you would call the yips, but there's a lot of different ways that manifests itself. Yeah. So for a pitcher, most times you hear the yips, it's like a guy's throwing a ball to the backstop. For me, it was not like that. On the mound, I could throw the ball pretty much wherever I wanted to. It was when I got off the mound and had to like take some off and make like a soft little throw. I just struggled. For whatever reason, there was a a mental challenge there. And it really hurt my chances of playing and having success. And it took me some time to work through that. I never really fully got through it in my playing career. It took me some time after my playing career to work through it. And it's such a hard thing to articulate to people, because here you are, imagine you've done something since you could walk, basically, without ever thinking about it. And then one day it's like you just forget how to do it. And the harder you try, the harder it is. And so there's a lot there, obviously. That's a huge topic. But those are the times that I really come back to when I think about my career. It's not like, yeah, I had some good moments, but it's not the highs at all. It's the struggles, and it's the lessons. And then it's all the work I've done since then to figure out, okay, why did I go through that? How can I use that to help myself? And then how can I use that to help somebody else now? And that to me is what I think about when I reflect on my athletic career.
Yeah. I mean, isn't that funny that you think back on the periods of struggle? I mean, I've just been, thinking a lot about this recently too. Just the like periods of struggle being so formative, and being the ones that are not fun to go through, but the ones that end up being the most important stuff that you go through. I don't know if you've ever connected with Harris Faranoff on Twitter at all.
I have,
but,
he's a good guy.
Yeah, but he and I had a conversation, not a podcast conversation, but we were chatting one day, and he was telling me he went through something similar with the yips, and gosh, I can imagine that's got to be so incredibly frustrating to go through. But listen, that is really cool that you progressed through baseball so much and kind of learned so much along the way. Got a chance to play in the ACC. I mean, that's like dream type stuff. So super cool. And also I love the persistence that you kind of showed to, starting out of junior college and working your way up to the D1. That's really awesome stuff. So when you got out of school, I know you kind of have held various roles in your career so far. What does that career progression kind of post college look like for you?
Yeah. So I was a journalism major in college, loved to write, thought I wanted to have a career in the media business. And so I ended up starting my career in the media business at ESPN, coming out of school.
You're kind of backing your way into it, by the way.
Yeah. In a roundabout way where the same skills are becoming valuable. But yeah, I spent some time at ESPN up in Connecticut, and then spent some time at Fox Sports in Los Angeles. And I was thinking of you because I grew up in Cheshire, Connecticut, which is like one town over from Bristol. And so like we used to have a bunch of the guys, like some of like the nicest parts of our town were like some of the big name ESPN guys. So like Chris Berman lived in our town. And then I moved to Charlotte eventually, where I am now. And ESPN, that's like their other big operation. So I'm like a mile away from their operation here in Charlotte. ESPNU's down there, I think, right? Yeah. It was a great experience. Some of my best memories and a lot of early professional lessons were at ESPN and at Fox Sports. Learned a lot, had some great managers, leaders, colleagues. But I just got burnt out eventually on the media business. For me, I got really interested in the business side of it, and then wanted to experience something else. I come from on one side of my family, a family of entrepreneurs. My grandfather was an immigrant from Greece, built a business. My dad grew up in that business. My dad's now built his business for 25 years. And so I always thought that I would at some point go do something entrepreneurial. I just didn't know what that would look like. And so 2016, I went and joined an early stage startup company called Striver in the tech space, and spent the last 6 years there. Helping build that company. It was about 15 people or so when I joined, helped build it like around 150. So like cool. Early stage experience and everything that comes with that, which was rewarding. And along the way, just really developed a love and passion for helping people develop. I'm not a technical skill set kind of guy. So as my career has grown, I've gone up management and leadership type of paths. It's funny, coming out of North Carolina, my coach there, said, "Hey, if you want to go into the college baseball coaching profession, I'll help you do that." And I almost did. I almost did for a second there, but was curious about other things. And so I think that was planted a seed, 12, 13 years ago, and came back around, recently. And so I left at the end of March, this past March, to go out on my own and coach. And so now
awesome. I didn't realize it was so recent.
Yeah, I was doing some stuff informally, but not full time. And so, so now I'm doing that full time. I'm writing full time. And then I'm also helping some other business leaders build their audiences online, which has been fun to do too.
That's really cool. Yeah, I'm sure there's always a potential income stream for pitching lessons for you on the side if you ever need it too. I'm kind of wishing you lived closer to me too, because I would hire you for that right now.
My son we'll have to cross paths sometime in person.
Yeah, for real. We pay a lot for pitching lessons, both for my son and my daughter, but it's great instruction. Well, cool. Thanks for that kind of whirlwind tour through your background. So, a couple of things I want to talk to you about. I mean, you've been doing some really fantastic work and putting out some great stuff on platforms like Twitter and LinkedIn, and some of that stuff I'd love to dive in a little bit more with you, because I think it could be really beneficial to our listeners here. So, one of the things that jumped out when kind of going through everything that you put out on Twitter was some of the experiences that you've had with the Navy SEALs. So there's so much there. I'd love to just hear about, how did you get connected with the Navy SEALs to begin with? And it sounds like you even trained with them, which sounds amazing. But I'd be curious just to hear about that whole experience and maybe like what you learned.
Yeah. There's so much. So it was a couple of years ago, I came across a guy named Chad Wright online, and we started just chatting. I got to know him a little bit. Now have become friends with him. And he was a Navy SEAL for 12 years, and runs a company now with his brother that trains people. So it's basically training people. And what they do is they take people out into wilderness environments and put them through training experiences that teach them things like leadership skills, teamwork skills, other personal development type skills in an environment where there's so much natural stress that it really challenges you physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, like in every kind of way. And one of the beautiful things about it, this is part of the training, is they don't really advertise what they do. You don't have much information at all. And so the first training mission that I went on with them was over a year ago, and it was 3 days kind of deep into the Smoky Mountains. So I won't say exactly where we went because they like to keep it private for the next group of people who go out there.
Okay.
But we spend a day going out. So like you're out in locations where very few, if any, people are. And if you make mistakes, and get hurt, it's going to take some time to get you out of there. And so that is part of the training. And this is where, one of the things that's been the most foundational for me, which we can dive into in detail if you'd like, is just the pillars of mindset that they teach in the SEALs. And that is the first thing we started with, how to think and how to be, the three pillars are patient, present, and deliberate. What do those mean and how to apply them in that environment, but then also how to take what you learn, because, those of us who live normal lives, we're not in the wilderness every day. How do you apply that in daily life, in business, with your family, right, in your communities? And so that's what we did. And so I've trained with them a few times, and we'll do it more in the future. And it's just amazing. And again, that's how I learn, going out and having these experiences and learning those lessons.
That sounds awesome. So 3 pillars of mindset: patient, present, and deliberate. So tell me a little bit more about each of those and like what you've kind of taken away on each of those.
Yeah. So I'll explain each of them and how you can apply them. So three pillars of mindset: be patient, be present, be deliberate. So let's start with patient. So three aspects of being patient. Number one, you got to be patient with yourself. So you are going to make mistakes. That's part of growth. As you're learning new things, uh, you're going to struggle, right? And if you're expecting it all to come on day one, that's going to be tough. So be patient with yourself. Have some grace. Um, be patient with your teammates. They're going to make mistakes. So don't get frustrated, right? You're going to need them and they're going to need you. And then the third part of patience is being patient with the process. So, for me, I do endurance sports now. If I'm running a 50K race, 32, 33 miles, I'm running basically 27 miles to have 5 miles of growth, right? Like mile 1 to 27, I'm just kind of doing it. It's not, it's mile 27 to 32, 33 where all of the growth happens. So mile 1 to mile 27 is a process. I have to be patient with that process. I can't go from mile 1 to mile 28. It doesn't work that way. So if you're building a business, if you are building a family, whatever it is you're doing, it's a process and you can't skip along the way. You have to go through it and you have to be patient with that. And that's difficult because I think it's human nature to want to project forward. It's human nature to be impatient. And so being patient with the process is critical. So be patient.
So it's kind of like this idea of just like the consistent monotony of it and just hammering away at it nonstop. It almost reminds me of what you were saying earlier about baseball. It's just like, when you were getting ahead of yourself and worrying too much what, scouts were thinking or whoever else was thinking is when you weren't performing. But when you just kind of dialed it back in and focused on the process was when things actually started to work for you.
Yeah. And more than just like hammering away, at monotonous work, it's accepting that life is a process and embracing it. Like that's the first step. You can't get around that fact. It is just true. And so embracing that is the first part of mindset. Now, how do you embrace the process? Step 2 here, be patient. Right. And so, there's a great story that my buddy told about SEAL training. So when you become a SEAL, for anyone who's unfamiliar, you go through a training period called BUDS. And part of BUDS is Hell Week. And I think most people are familiar with Hell Week. It's what it sounds like. It's pretty terrible. And so he said, when do you think most people quit in SEAL training? And I was like, oh, Hell Week, for sure. I mean, you don't sleep for 6 days. You're pushed beyond like any concept of a limit. And he's like, yeah, that's a good answer. That's what most people say. He's like, it's not Hell Week. And he's like, when most people quit in SEAL training is actually one of the easiest in air quotes, evolutions, which is a 1 mile beach run. So you're on the sand and you run 1 mile down the beach, you turn around and run 1 mile back. There's no time. There's no one yelling at you to run faster. You just have to look like you're running, right? The caveat is they don't tell you when you're going to stop. And the instructors, they stop when a certain number of people quit.
Wow.
It's like it's a weed out evolution, right? And so my buddy who's a SEAL says, so why do people quit in that evolution? It's the easiest thing we did. All you have to do is shuffle your feet and not stop. And the reason people quit is because they couldn't stay present. They started thinking, I can't do this for 12 hours. What if they make us run to tomorrow? What if they make us run for 2 days? I can't do that.
Yep.
And they become overwhelmed. They start thinking about the big picture and they forget that all you need to do is just keep your feet moving and run this 1 mile. They no longer are present. Right. And so when you are trying to work through a process and be patient with the process, the number one thing you can do is be present on today. And this is so easy to say and so difficult to do because it's not human nature. It's not human nature. And then the third pillar is be deliberate. So there's two parts of being deliberate. One is being deliberate with your actions and being deliberate with your speech. So I'll give you an example of each. Being deliberate with your actions. So out in the wilderness environment, it's literal, it's physical. So if every step you take, the way that you pick up a 50-pound pack, if you're not deliberate in how you do that, you can injure yourself, you can injure someone else. And if you do that, you're out of the game, right? In real life, it may not be physical, but examples of being deliberate with your actions are, how do you sleep? What food do you eat? How do you manage your time? Or like, what actions are you taking in the day that are going to either make you more effective or less effective? These are just choices. There's no magic here. And then the second part is being deliberate with your speech. And this is one that's super powerful. And I'm passionate about it because I have seen the value of this in my own life, in my athletic career. And now I use it all the time. It's normal to have negative thoughts, right? Thoughts just kind of come and go. That's fine. You can't really control that. What we can control are the words that we speak. And that is powerful. And most people do not understand that your tongue is your rudder, and what you say will dictate your mindset in a lot of ways. So here's like an everyday example. How many times do we say things like, I'm tired today, or it's hot outside, or I don't feel like doing this, right? Normal things to say, but they hold no productive value. And subconsciously, they don't feel like major things. Subconsciously, they ingrain a mindset and a way of thinking of like, I just don't want to do this. I'm not going to do it. It's hard. I can't. Right. Yeah. Where a way to apply being deliberate with your speech is just recognize that you're having that thought and say something that is positive or that puts your mind in a place where you want it to be. I think of this as counterpunching, right? So if my thought is, man, I feel tired today, I could say something like, I have a lot of energy right now. Or, one thing I actually say when I'm running races is, I never get tired. I'll be at mile 30 and feeling terrible.
Yep. Yeah. Now, will you actually like verbally say that, or do you just think that in your mind?
No, physically say it out loud.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the power of the spoken word, and people are going to look at you like you're crazy if you're doing this like in a group of people. But you can also, one of my favorite things to do, because it's kind of funny, is you can like tap somebody next to you and say something to them like if I didn't know you, Greg, and we're running a marathon and we're on mile 25, I could be like, Greg, you know what's crazy, man? You and I, we never get tired. And
I thought you were going to say, you know what's crazy? I never get tired. No. And I was going to be like, get out of here, dude. Yeah. I don't want to hear that.
Yeah, that wouldn't be cool, Or you could say, you could say something like, Greg, the longer we go, man, the stronger we get.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if it's true. It only matters if you believe it. And this is the key for people. This is the key. When you speak words out loud, they just get ingrained in your head. And they're so much more powerful than the self-talk or internal thoughts that you have. So be patient, be present, be deliberate. Those are the three pillars of mindset. Obviously, we've covered them quickly here. We could spend a whole hour on that, but hopefully that gives people some tactical tools to use.
Yeah, I love that. And I that last one, the power of the spoken word, I think that's really fascinating to me. I mean, I've kind of explored some similar things, just around trying to tweak the language that I use, using a lot more I get to rather than I have to, like stuff like that, right? Like I have to take my kids to practice today. Actually, I get to take my kids to practice today. Like pretty damn cool that I get to do that because they're only going to be young once and all that kind of stuff, And so little language changes like that.
You have kids, Greg. This is a great one to use with your kids. We have a 2-year-old daughter, so she's she comprehends some stuff, not everything. But this is a great one to start practicing with your kids. The words that you use, they hear everything, right? And it's powerful. So I remember, one of my youth coaches, I don't know, do you know Justin Sua? You may follow him on Twitter.
But believe it or not, I'm actually set to interview him on the podcast after the season is over. So he's the strength, for anybody who doesn't know, he's the strength trainer for the Tampa Rays.
Yeah. He's a mental performance coach. Anyway, his dad is Murphy Sua. Murphy was one of my travel ball coaches when I was a kid. And
oh, cool.
Murphy's he's an amazing guy. And we would be 9 years old, and he never talked about this like being deliberate in those terms, but he was teaching us how to do this. It would be hot outside, and he would hear us say, "God, it's so hot outside today," and he would say, "No, it's not. It's a nice warm day." Or we would play a game at night, and it'd be like 58 degrees, and we're by the ocean, so there's wind chill, and be like, "Man, I'm freezing. Like I don't want to hit. I don't want to hit."
Yeah.
And he'd be like, "It's just a nice cool evening." And we're like, what is he talking about? Like, no, it's not. But what he was doing subconsciously was reframing how we talk to ourselves. And I didn't realize that until years later. I'm like, oh, that's what Murphy was doing. Wow. But that is a tool that is so simple and can be used at the earliest ages.
That's a great call. Yeah. That's awesome. I'm going to need to spend some time thinking about that one after this conversation, because there's probably a lot of ways I can implement that in my life. Okay, before we move on from the seals, I want to ask you just a couple of other seal related questions, because there was a couple of things that jumped out in some of your written work that resonated with me. What does "don't fight the cold" mean?
So in SEAL training, there's something called surf torture, and it sounds pretty much, it is like it sounds. So they lay down in the ocean in shallow water, and they lock arms, and they just let the waves come up and rush over them. And the instructors are, at least this is how it's been described to me. I wasn't a SEAL, so I never did this. The instructors are tracking hypothermia, and they keep them in the water until just about the point it gets dangerous. And so if you're in cold water, your natural instinct is to tense up, right? And I relate to this as an athlete because I've been in many ice baths as an athlete, and anyone who's taken a cold shower can relate. You tense up, and all you can think about for those first 30 to 60 seconds are, man, this is cold. And you're spending all your energy fighting it. And what happens when you do that is it takes an enormous amount of physical and mental energy away from everything else that could be productive for you. And so for the SEALs, one mindset reframe that they would use is don't fight the cold, kind of relax into it. And the concept there is, cold is a metaphor. The concept there is we're going to be in situations or face things where there's some kind of tension. There's some kind of external resistance or force. And we can choose to fight against it if we want, but it's not going to do anything. It's not going to do anything productive. It's actually going to detract us from more productive, efficient, effective thoughts. Or we can choose to accept it and embrace it. And there's a funny thing that happens. This might sound kind of crazy until you do it. When you say, okay, this is cold or this hurts, I'm just going to accept it. It's fine. It's not going to last forever. When you do that, it's like this well of energy gets opened up to you, because you're no longer spending your time trying to fight this thing you can't control. You just accept it and say, okay, it's going to pass. And so, a physical example, I use this all the time. Like, this is why I do endurance sports, back like deep into a race. Something's going to be hurting inevitably. So I could say, man, my feet hurt or my back hurts or whatever, but it doesn't really matter because I can't fix it at that moment. So what I say is I acknowledge it. I don't deny it. Okay. Yeah, my feet are hurting. That's all right. This is not going to be forever. I'm just going to accept it. And within a couple minutes, it doesn't affect you the way that it was, because your mind is now going back to other things, right? And this is where all these tools come into play. Be deliberate, right? Now I'm going to be present on what I'm doing. I'm not going to be focused on my feet. I'm going to be present on what I'm doing now. And so it doesn't always have to be physical. You could be going through something, here's a parenting example that I'm working on right now with myself. We are into the toddler years squarely, and those are not easy in a lot of ways.
You said your daughter is 2.
She's 2. Yeah, we have a second due in 5 weeks, so we're about to be a family.
Congrats!
Yeah, thank you.
I've got an 10, almost 11-year-old, 8-year-old, and then we also have a 2-year-old. So we're with you there on the 2-year-old front. So we had a little bit of a shock to the system coming back to diapers after quite a few years, but carry on, because I'm with you on 2-year-olds being difficult.
Yeah, so I was talking to my wife the other night, and I was like, I just feel like I fight our daughter over so much. She's throwing these tantrums or whatever a 2-year-old does, and I fight her over it. Like, I want to discipline her. I don't want to give in. That's part of my own stubbornness and pride. And I sat down tonight with her, and I'm like, I just have to stop fighting this. Like, I have to stop resisting. I have to work with it. I have to accept it and work with it, as opposed to trying to control it and manipulate it. And I thought back to, don't fight the cold. Like, this is the cold in a much different context.
Yeah.
And so this is kind of how I look for ways to apply these kind of lessons everywhere. And it's just funny that, they pop up in ways that you don't expect.
Yeah. I like that one. I've, for what it's worth, so 3 kids into parenting now, I can tell you, like, I almost feel bad for my oldest son, because I'm like, oh my God, he got the like version 1.0 of us as parents. Right. And it's like, now that we're, onto our youngest child, we're definitely, I think, a lot more sort of relaxed about it. And I think with that first kid, you're like, you want to make sure they're developing right. You want to make, I've got all these kind of expectations that you've always thought, this is what my kid is going to be, and this is how I'm going to parent. But by the time you get a couple of kids into it, you're like, this kid is who he is.
Good luck.
We're going to kind of have to accept that. And, we can try to guide him and things like that. But, a little more kind of taking things as they come, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. Listen, one more thing I want to ask you, SEAL related, and then we'll move on. There was something called full benefit that I saw in something you wrote that really resonated with me. So what is this concept of full benefit?
Yeah. So I learned this from my buddy. I've also heard Jocko. I'm sure most of you, if not all you, know who Jocko is, talk about it. It's again, another simple reframe. And this is why I love the SEALs and other members of the military, is because they have got these very simple, practical tools that can apply to everyday life. So full benefit. So when a SEAL is going through something difficult, or someone's going through something difficult, they say, or sometimes they say, full benefit. So if you're out hiking and it starts pouring rain, instead of saying, man, this sucks, they say full benefit. If, everyday example, if you're driving and your car breaks down and now you're on the side of the road waiting for the truck to come for 45 minutes, you could say, wow, I was late to this and I got so much to do and this is so inconvenient. Or you could say full benefit. And the concept of full benefit is adversity, and it could be big adversity, it could be small adversity, but adversity presents an opportunity for you to get better in some kind of way, right? And so what matters is not so much what is happening, but how you choose to view it and how you choose to use it as an opportunity. Again, this goes back to some of the basic principles we've talked about, right? Like being deliberate. So if something happens, you have an opportunity to be deliberate in the way that you speak to yourself about it, speak to others about it. Maybe that, just to use that car breaks down example, yeah, it sucks, but maybe that's an opportunity for you to practice being patient. Maybe it's an opportunity for you to practice being less selfish. So instead of thinking about how inconvenient it is to you, maybe think about, who can I call right now? I've got some time. Who could I, check in on? Maybe the truck guy comes and he's having a tough day, right? How can I lift him up, right? And I know this sounds a little bit cheesy and cheeky, but these are the little things. These are the little differences that separate good from great and great from elite in whatever way that you want to define that, and in whatever part of life you want to apply it. And sometimes it's hard to believe because you see these people, you see like a Navy SEAL from the outside or a world-class athlete or whatever, you're like, these people are just superhuman, right? Like, I can't even relate to that. And then you get to know them a little bit, and yeah, they've got some extraordinary characteristics for sure. But so much of that has just been these little tweaks that have been trained deliberately over time that anyone can apply into their life. Not that you're going to be a SEAL or a world-class athlete, but you'll be whatever that version of that is for you if you are maniacal about applying these things.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are tactics that you can use that are powerful in helping you to kind of get yourself in the right mindset. It's funny. I always think about the example of being stuck on the tarmac on an airplane, and you can tell a lot about people by looking around and seeing how people are reacting, right? There's like literally nothing you can do. You cannot control anything. You are stuck, right? And some people lose their minds, right? They are getting aggressive with flight attendants and complaining, and other people are like Zen mode. And like, what's the difference? It's probably, the ability to reframe things in your own head.
And this is where,
I was
sorry, Greg, this is where back to the 3 pillars, right? Being patient with yourself. So I don't want to make this seem like this is easy at all. And I also don't want to make it seem like I've got this up figured out. I literally struggle with these every single day, like every day. But
that's the process,
it's
man,
the process.
Right?
So back to the principles, right? Be patient with yourself. Have some grace. And if you're just starting out, the first step is just being aware of these things. If you're sitting on a plane and you're starting to get frustrated, the fact that you can just detach and be aware that, okay, I'm getting frustrated right now. That's step one. Most people don't even do that. And then you have the chance to start to apply these principles. But it's a lifelong process, and you're not going to be perfect. I struggle every single day, and that's okay. You just stick with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if you're a meditation guy, but I kind of dip in and out of periods when I'm really into meditation. But probably the biggest thing that I've learned from meditation is this idea of like an arm's length relationship between me and whatever emotion. And so to use that example of being on the airplane, like just being able to step outside of yourself to realize, okay, look at me, I'm getting pretty angry and frustrated here, as opposed to identifying with that emotion and saying, that's me. I am Mr. Angry, frustrated. Just that arm's length relationship there and that awareness is often enough to kind of diffuse it.
That space. If anyone's listening and hasn't read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, an amazing book, he talks about that space between stimulus and response. I think that's what you're talking about, Greg. Like, in that space is where you've got the opportunity to choose how you're going to respond and how you're going to operate.
I was just thinking I'm due for a reread of that. That's one of the most powerful books ever written, in my opinion. Okay. Last thing there, full benefit. I will just want to thank you because, you put that out on Twitter a little while ago, and I was, reading through it, and, my family just went through a tough period where my son experienced, several seizures for the first time in his life. He ultimately got diagnosed with epilepsy, which has been something that my family's been working through. But, the concept of full benefit, it's almost actually somewhat related to sort of being thankful for what just happened to you, right? So full benefit. Okay, I basically tried to go through this exercise myself and thinking about how I wanted to react to this situation. But I thought about full benefit. Okay, full benefit is like, okay, this kid's going to have some challenges, but it's ultimately going to make him stronger. And that's something I tried to, as strange and uncomfortable as it felt, tried to go through the process of being thankful that was actually happening. So I don't know if you see any parallels there between full benefit and like gratitude.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's an amazing perspective that you have. And I also want to say here, I think this is important to say, I don't want to trivialize like very difficult moments in life. Like obviously there are traumas that people go through where you're not going to say, "Oh, full benefit. I can get better through this." Like that's not what I'm talking about. I do think the perspective of full benefit can help you in any situation, but obviously there are adversities that people go through that are terrible and horrific. And I don't want this to sound like, oh, just brush it off and see how it can make you better. That's not what we're talking about.
Sure.
But for your situation, one, I'm really happy that your son's okay, and I'm praying for him. But two, I think the perspective that you're taking going forward is that, okay, yeah, he's going to have these challenges, but it's not a life sentence, right? In terms of like his life's not over. How can he now use this? How can we help him, and how can he use it to become an even stronger person? And I'm sure someday he will use that experience to help somebody else.
Yep. Exactly. I'm sure of that too. So no, I appreciate you saying that. Okay, Teddy, let's talk a little bit about coaching. So I don't want you to give away all your secret sauce here in terms of what you do with your coaching clients. Okay. Well, then tell me, I'm curious, like if there's something that you use with your coaching clients, whether it's a framework or a tactic. I've seen you write about this idea of inner scorecard before. Just curious, if you think about our listeners and, maybe they're new to you and hearing about, some of the perspectives you bring. Curious, like what's something that you've used with your coaching clients that you think might be beneficial for others to learn about?
Yeah, sure. So there's no one like framework or tactic or what have you that I just apply across the board. When I work with people, it's very individual and it's based on what's going on with them. So, but what I strive to do in life, really, in when I write, when I work with people, whatever, it's all the same to me, is I try to provide value to help someone be better. And so one of the things that comes up often is just simple daily habits. And whether you're trying to be, this often comes at, if I'm coaching, it comes up in the context of becoming a better leader, but it applies to anybody, right? And so how do I just be a better individual so that I can be better for other people? And one of the things that comes up is something that I call the 3 pillars of wellness. This is a framework, if you want to call it that, for simple daily habits that I've developed over the last couple of years. It's been probably the single best daily habit that I've developed maybe ever. And it's simple. So here it is. There are 3 things that I do every day. Something to nourish my mind, something to nourish my body, and something to nourish my soul. And it doesn't really matter the duration of those things, and it doesn't really matter the intensity. To me, consistency is what I optimize for. So doing it every day. What matters is I just check the box and I do them every day. So I'll give you some examples of what this can look like. On an average day for me, when I don't have hours to spend on this stuff, I'll do my morning routine will fluctuate a little bit, but it'll have some kind of component of reading and writing. Just that's something to nourish my mind. It'll have, for me, faith is a big part of my life. So it'll have some component of either reading the Bible or prayer. That's something to nourish my soul. And then at some point in the day, I'll have a workout, and that's to nourish my body. Right. And so on an average day, my workout's probably 45 minutes to an hour. If I've got like a completely blank day and no commitments, I may spend my entire day on these 3 buckets. I might do a long run that takes a couple hours. I might spend a few hours of deep work on a project or writing something. I might spend, an hour or 2 reading the Bible, right? But it doesn't have to be that. If I have almost no time, let's say I'm traveling, well, what I can do in the airport is I can walk for 15 minutes. That's my body. I can pray for 60 seconds. That's my soul. I can read a book on the airplane. That's my mind. Right. And so for me, what I've learned through mistakes and failure is that if I don't have something in those 3 buckets every day, I just don't have a lot to give to other people. I'm not a great dad. I'm not a great husband. I'm not a great colleague. And so those are the things that fill me up. And so those will look different for everybody. But, a lot of times when I'm working with people and they say, hey, I'm struggling as a manager, I'm struggling as a leader, I'll ask them, okay, well, walk me through your normal day. Like, how do you manage yourself first? That's where it starts. And using those 3 pillars are a really easy way to come up with a framework for you. And you can tweak them, you can make them work for you. But mind, body, soul, do something to nourish each one every day. And that's a really solid foundation for a daily habit and managing yourself.
I love that. I love the simplicity of it, right? I'm always trying different frameworks and tactics and things like that to work with. One is this idea of like the golden hour. So it's like 1 hour first thing in the morning where it's dedicated basically to me. Like there are going to be a million demands on my time is from 7 a.m. when my kids start waking up until, all day long with work and this and that. But if I can get in that 1 hour, and I don't know that I know that I have not framed it in such a way, but that's essentially what I'm doing. Whether it's working out or journaling or meditating or what have you, it's the same thing. And it's like, that is so important to kind of, as you say, to kind of fill yourself up, because you need that. You need that because everything else, well, not everything else, but a lot of other activities that you're going to go through during the day are going to be depleting your energy, or at least you're going to be needing to use your energy on that. So I think that really makes sense. Now, curious, what is there anything when you think about nourishing your mind, what jumps out at you there? Like, are there particular, books or podcasts or things like that? Anything that jumps out at you there when you're trying to nourish your mind?
Yeah, for me, the nourishing your mind comes down to stretching it, just like you would stretch your body, right, to help your body grow. So for me, I like to do things that either make me think deeply or make me think creatively or encourage me to solve a problem. So it usually is reading or writing or working through a project. I prefer writing or working on a project because I'm doing something and there's an output to it as opposed to consuming. But yeah, it can be anything, honestly. So, I mean, I listen to podcasts. I listen to them normally on walks. One that I love is a podcast called No Turning Back. It's a leadership podcast by Stanley McChrystal and Chris Fussell.
Oh,
yeah,
cool.
That one's great. I've been loving My First Million lately. Those guys, Sam Parr and Trumper, do a great job. Great business podcast. But yeah, so it doesn't really matter so much to me what you do as long as it's deliberate, focused time where you are challenging your mind to learn, grow, stretch in some kind of way. It should not be like passively or lazily consuming something. It's not like watching a show that you're just, it's not entertainment, at least the way that I define it. It's a mental exercise period.
Yep. Yeah. My practice is pretty similar, I would say, in that a couple things. One, I don't know if you find this or not, but for me, and I've kind of always been this way, writing is actually very therapeutic for me. And so even just going through this recent thing with my son, like writing some newsletters that really dove into that is like, it's a way that I kind of, process information and get it out. And so I find that to be very nourishing for my mind, to use your language. And I'm similar in terms of podcasts and walks and things like that. One thing I've been trying to optimize for. I don't know what the right balance is, but some days I'll go out for walks, or I'll even get on my Peloton bike and I'll be listening to a podcast or be listening to an audiobook. Other days, in fact, some recently this week, I've been going out for walks like just nothing. And, it's kind of funny. I can't remember who said it, but like, if you're out there, like in the morning walking around with like, AirPods, you're like, who is this guy? He's walking around like an absolute psycho, no AirPods in, right?
Yeah.
But there is something to be said for, in a living in a time right now where we're just pummeled by information, right? There is something to be said for, periods of quiet and thinking and just letting your mind process what has been going on.
I love that. I have a buddy who we were doing something called silent walks, where he lives on an opposite side of the coast or opposite side of the country, but we just text each other like, got my silent mile in today. And it's so powerful.
That.
Yeah. When I run, I rarely run with headphones in. I mean, I'll run 15 miles with nothing. And part of that is, I think I connect with what you say, like we're bombarded so much during the day. Like that's my time to just kind of be with myself. But then too, it's also an amazing part of training your mind to like not have a stimulus to get you going. You have to go back to the tools, right? Being deliberate with your speech and things of that nature to get you through, not get you through, but to work through whatever the training is.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. All right. Listen, I told you I'd get you out of here on time. So I got a couple more quick things to cover with you and then we'll get you on your way. Like I mentioned up front, you've done an awesome job building a presence for yourself on Twitter and LinkedIn. Curious, why you've done that and, any recommendations for folks in terms of, building an audience or anything like that. I'm sure we could spend 10 hours talking about that, but maybe just more on the motivation side, like what you're
I've always loved to write. I kind of grew up writing, and we talked about, studied journalism and then started my career in media. So writing has been, I think like you, I write a lot to process and write a lot to learn. So writing comes naturally and I just love it and enjoy it. I really got serious about getting back to creating content consistently when I decided to leave my last company and go start my own business. And so initially the motivation was to start building an audience to support that business. So I started like in January on LinkedIn and Twitter. I've been on Twitter since my media days, but kind of was absent from it for the last 6 years. And so really recommitted to it with a different perspective in April of this year, so just a few months ago. And it's been an amazing experience. And to me, fundamentally, the best part has been the relationships. I mean, this conversation we're having right now is a great example of it.
For sure. Almost every podcast guest I've had has come from Twitter. And it's for me, it is like, you really do sort of get out of it like what you put in on the relationship front, but it's been pretty magical from that standpoint.
Cool. And so just, you asked like what my tips would be. I mean, I think you'll see a theme here. Like this just might be my simple mind, but I keep things incredibly simple, right? So the tips are, and I hope if you're looking for a shortcut or a hack, like I don't have those. It's like one, start, 2, do it every day, and 3, just don't quit. Like it's literally, and I know that sounds, I don't say that like flippantly either. Like most people do not sustain. And so at some point they fall off, but between 3 and 6 months, they fall off. And the people who continue like are going to be successful. And so I have a motto that I tell myself when I'm training, which is consistency over intensity, meaning like I optimize for consistency. So I'm very rarely like going out and either like crushing my body in the gym or running 20 miles, or I'm very rarely like trying to write 10,000 words. Like I optimize for just doing something every day, first and foremost. And so if you're building an audience, like write 1 tweet a day, write, if you're not a huge writer, like speak into your phone for 30 seconds and take the transcript and post it on LinkedIn and just start there. And then, I think the other thing, something that you've done exceptionally well, and others is don't think about social media as networking. Think about it as just making friends and build genuine relationships. And one, most importantly, like over time, that's just going to be fun for you and it's going to lead to things you don't expect. But 2, like that really is the way to build thoughtfully a good community. And so it's funny, as I have like produced my own content and grown on LinkedIn and Twitter, I've had some business leaders who I started talking to about coaching wanted to talk about audience building, and they're like, "Hey, I don't have the time to do this, but like, I get it's important. So how do I do it?" And I think we are just beginning, really. We're like at the top of the first inning in terms of the era of audiences as a business asset. And so I would encourage anyone who's listening to start.
It all comes back to baseball, Teddy.
I only got a few things in my life, man, that I come back to.
All right. Well, last question. It's not a difficult one at all. I'm just kidding. It's a pretty heady question, but I'm going to hit you with it because I hit all my guests with it. What's one thing you have figured out in life thus far that maybe others haven't yet?
Oh, Lord. I don't know that I've figured out anything that others haven't, Greg, to be honest.
I love the humility.
I'm being dead simple. Or dead serious. Look, here's the most honest answer that I have. For me, faith is a big part of who I am. It's a big part of my life. If you asked me, like, how do I boil my life down to one simple line, it would be love God and love others. And that's not something that I have figured out per se. It's just, to me, all the stuff we've talked about, I believe it, it's important. But for me, the way that I live my life is by that. And so at the end of my days, if I can look back and say I did those two things, I will be pretty satisfied with the life that I lived.
I love it. That's powerful, man. Well, good stuff. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I guess last question. If people want to follow you and find you, where's the best place? I think you probably gained a bunch of new fans from this conversation today. So where can they find you?
Yeah, Twitter or LinkedIn. So on Twitter, it's just my first initial and then last name. So T Mitrosilis. And then LinkedIn, just search my name and you'll find me. And send a message. Would love to chat. And just want to say thanks, Greg. I really enjoyed the conversation, man. And also want to just recognize you for the work that you do on this show, and also the amount of preparation and thought that you put in to getting ready for this conversation. It stands out to me. I appreciate people who take their craft seriously, and you do. So just wanted to say that.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate that. This has been a pleasure, and I'm really glad we connected, and I'm looking forward to staying in touch. And we'll link to all your handles and everything else in the show notes. So go check that out to follow Teddy. But Teddy, this has been awesome,
Thanks,
man.
Greg.
Thanks so much.
Enjoyed it, brother.